It's unbelievable where we were, where we are with the Columbia Bison right now.
On an unremembered date in July 2015, the Bison were founded by a man named Kevin Johnson. This was between JAL 3 and 4, when the league was transitioning from its unincorporated team sign-up structure to establishing actual franchises within the league. Just days before the Bison were created, the Underdogs, Rapids, and Cobras were created, making the Bison the last member of the league's 4 original franchises. At this point in time, a couple of modern rules were different. First, there was no CBA yet, meaning players were not put under contracts with money. Essentially, back then, teams would recruit their players. Second, teams pitched to their own players. The first 2 ball players for the Bison were Ty Johnson, MVP of JAL 1, and rookie Peter Gord. Heading into the JAL 4 season, the Bison were labeled contenders, and it showed in their regular season.
First year with the Bison. Yeah. JAL 4, it was, I remember it like it was yesterday. It was me and Parker, and we were at the beach, actually. We were killing it that tournament. We were undefeated, feeling good. And then going into that playoff game, we had the Underdogs, and they hadn't won a game all season, so we were ready to go. And that game was a heartbreaker. You could say Parker's pitching was the source of the disaster.
Honestly, they had a lot more talent than we did. We shouldn't have won that game, but we did thanks to Parker's pitching, so he was the real MVP for our team.
After the JAL 4 postseason debacle, Gord was cut from the team and Kevin Johnson elected to sign himself.
Listen, as the defending champs, we knew that it was going to be a tough game going into JL 5 because they were a tough out last tournament and they upgraded their roster with Kevin Johnson signing himself.
But, to everyone's surprise, the Bison's underachievement carried over into the regular season of JAL 5. Through all 3 games, Ty Johnson was utterly horrible, struggling to be productive in any way. A 1-2 finish gave the team the bottom seed in the playoffs.
Yeah, not the best tournament I've played, if we could say.
Ty really struggled in that entire tournament. Really, just couldn't get a hit. Had played so well the previous year, and just really struggled to put the ball in the bat. We struggled. We barely got into the playoff. But with Ty, you always just figure, as competitive as he is, that at some point he'll make a play.
When it mattered most, Ty came through, hitting a walk-off home run to end a 3 extra-inning semifinal contest that sent the Bison to their first ever WWCD Cup.
Oh my gosh, that hit felt so good. I had played so bad that entire tournament. I was super frustrated. Because I played well in the last couple tournaments, and then it just all went downhill. It all went downhill. And so got up to plate, had no confidence, but the walk-off, so it was redemption.
The momentum from that play carried the Bison to a 5-4 victory over the defending champion Cobras. The Bison were now kings of the league. After JAL 5, Ty Johnson decided to leave the team and join the Rapids. Reasoning for doing so is still a mystery today, especially after having just won a championship. In essence, this was the first time in the franchise era a player had ever switched teams.
I ended up leaving to the Rapids. People still don't know why I left to this day. Why would you leave? You guys just won the championship. It's a good question. It's probably the most criticized I've ever been in JL. You see, back then, players weren't paid real money. right? They were just paid. There was still a salary cap, and we had the same rules, but there wasn't real physical money that was being given. So even though I wasn't getting paid real money, the principle of getting paid was still present. So the Rapids offered me more fake money than the Bison did. Now, was it fake money? Yes. Was I getting anything? No.
Listen, guys, we all know it was real money.
To pick up the loss and still remain competitive in JAL 6, the Bisons acquired rookie Alex Allen, yes, me, the narrator, and Sarah Allen. During that season, Kevin was suffering from back problems and only played in partial amounts of every game during the regular season. As a result, I stepped up and made a few memorable moments.
Nobody could believe what they saw when Alex Allen hit that home run on literally his first career pitch in JAL history. It was incredible. And then the way he followed it up with that amazing catch he had later in the season, it was some of the most legendary stuff I've ever seen in one sitting, to be quite honest with you.
In the postseason, Kevin returned to a fully active status, and in the semifinals, the Bison took on their traitor, Ty, and the Rapids. As you can imagine, the Bison wanted this one bad, and just like the season before, it went to 3 extra innings, and Ty Johnson won the game on a walk-off base hit, only this time for the other team. The defeat was crushing, and in JAL 7, Kevin went in a new and optimistic direction with the team. Bryce DeSarmo, who had played his rookie season with the Underdogs and had won the fielding crown, was convinced to join the team.
We lost Ty after JL 5 winning that championship, and the following year weren't able to get all the way back. So we knew we had to make some upgrades to the roster, and what was available really was more a defensive player. So we relied really on, my ability maybe to just get the ball in play and score low numbers, but needed somebody who could make plays in the field. And Bryce really fit the bill there.
Was it a good sign? Sure. Was it a championship winning sign? I didn't think so.
The signing, however, paid off big time. DeSarmo had an incredible season and led the Bisons to finally a playoff win over Ty Johnson, who now played for the Underdogs.
And then we played them, and we lost. And it hurt.
In the WWCD Cup, the Bison took on the Rapids, who were much more depleted in talent from the previous 2 seasons, and now led by Tierney Uhlencott, but had somehow made a deep run. This time, like with Ty, it was the Bison who got sweet revenge and won their second title. DeSarmo went on to win season MVP after making one acrobatic catch in the field after another. Ultimately, he was the reason the team gave up just 1 run the entire postseason.
Bryce was out there catching balls like no one would believe. I hate him.
Obviously, I was wrong about Bryce.
In the offseason, history repeated itself. Once again, the Bison star player left for another team after winning the title, as DeSarmo took off for the Underdogs.
Under the table money.
Well aware of what had won him JAL 7, Kevin stuck to the formula and picked up a new player who was seemingly a clone of what he'd seen in DeSarmo. A player going into their sophomore season that made their JAL debut on the Underdogs and was a great fielder, Darren Ayub.
So after winning the championship in JL 7, we lost Bryce again to free agency, and so had to again find a way to fill that void, and really tried to just go again with a defensive player. We felt like Darren was the best defensive player out there available.
History again was having too much fun pulling the Bison's leg, though, because in the JAL 8 season, DeSarmo's team defeated them in the semifinals after leaving, just as Ty had done to them. Between JAL 8 and 9, major changes occurred in the league. They were the installations of the 2 modern rules that were mentioned at the beginning of the film: a CBA, wherein players were now signed to financial contracts, and pitching was now done by the opponent.
adding real money to the league was always something that we wanted to do and knew we wanted to do eventually when the league got to be big enough to where we could do it. And going into JL9, we were at that point. And when we added money, the league, just the nature of money's in the league. It's cool now. The league grew a ton. But, as a consequence, it kind of hurt the Bison in a lot of ways.
For Kevin, as an owner, the first rule change created a huge problem. At the time, he was a high school basketball coach, which meant he wouldn't be able to pay players or he could get himself into trouble with the school. As a result, Kevin was forced to sign only high school players, who in the JAL are not rewarded with a salary like everyone else. The two players who he picked up were Tate Klein, a pitcher, and DeSarmo, who was released by the Underdogs after a subpar season and agreed to come back to Columbia. JAL 9 was also the first season in which a traditional opening game was implemented. The game then and still today always features the defending champs versus an intriguing opponent. For the first ever of these games, the Bison were chosen as the intriguing squad to take on the Cobras, whom the Bison had developed a bitter rivalry with as the championship since the franchise era began and JAL 4 had gone Cobras, Bison, Cobras, Bison, Cobras. In the game itself, Klein threw the league's first no-hitter in the first defensive pitched game. The Bison won 2-1.
Honestly, that opening game of JL 9 was pretty frustrating. I thought I pitched a good game. We only gave up 2 runs. Tate just pitched better than I did. He threw a no-hitter.
Cruising into the playoffs as the number 2 seed, the Bison met on the JAL's first ever expansion team, the Tootle Lynx, in the semifinals. The Lynx were brand new to the league and had quietly snuck into the postseason. Nothing about them was quiet anymore, though, when it was over, as the Bison fell 1-0 and the Lynx went on to win it all.
That loss to the Lynx, though, that was the real turning point, I think. It's when the Bison started going downhill and the Lynx went into their dominant era of the league.
Up until that point, the JL was the Cobras and the Bison's league. The championships had gone Cobras, Bison, Cobras, Bison. And then the Lynx kind of came in and just took their spot, really, is what happened.
Following JAL 9, Kevin realized that without being able to pay players, it would be impossible to stay competitive in a growing league where others would do so. For that reason, and the fact that he had already surely solidified his legacy as a JAL owner with 2 titles, Kevin decided to step away and sold the team back to the JAL.
Yeah, so basically we as the commissioners were given the duty of filling this team with players. And we didn't really care if they had the best players on their team. We just cared if they had players on their team. So what we did was we gave them filler players, really.
Those filler players turned out to be rookie James French, who would later buy the team, and rookie Michael Screen. In JAL 10, the league-owned Bison and its 2 rookie players were 1-1 in the regular season heading into their final game. To everyone's disbelief, a win over the undefeated Cobras would have got them into the playoffs as the number 1 seed, but they lost 13-1 and amazingly placed dead last. This was the first time ever the mighty Bison missed the playoffs.
A lot of people don't realize this, but if the Bison would have beat the Cobras in that game, they would have took first and came out of that going into the postseason as first. But instead, they lost and ended dead last, all due to point differential.
The whole league could have been different if that one single thing could have changed.
During the JAL 10 season, the commissioners couldn't help but notice French's enthusiasm for the league.
And then after the tournament, for my enthusiasm, Cal offered me the team because the league owned it at the time.
Right after the season, they met and decided to offer him the team, which he took immediately.
We hope that Frenchie and his group would be able to continue our tradition that had us as one of the top programs in the league.
Under new ownership, the Bison had new life. In JAL 11, the notorious Snow Bowl, the team acquired Ty Franklin and finished 2-1 with an extra innings win over the defending champion Rapids in the final regular season game to sneak into the playoffs as the bottom seed. Even though they went on to lose to the top-seeded Lynx, there was hope and optimism. The Bison were on their way back to the top. French was named to the All-Star team, and expectations were high going into JAL 12.
You know, James' pitching that tournament, quite honestly, was unbelievable. And who knows if it was due to the ice and the mud that was on the ground. That was an infamous tournament.
Little did anyone know their win on December 27th, 2015 versus the Rapids would be their last to date.
We are the Bison's last W to date. To date! That's almost a year. And we were the defending champs. Losing that game kicked us out of the playoffs. Embarrassing.
Over the next 3 seasons, JAL 12, 13, and 14, the Bison went winless.
The Bison, they went winless, guys. James didn't have nearly as good of a tournament.
Got anything else to add about the good old Bison?
Not really.
Is it the Bison are kind of, who knows? I mean,
Through this 3-season span of horror, the team has made a handful of roster moves, but the team's core, French and Franklin, has remained intact.
The last 3 seasons have been kind of rough on the Bison. You know, trying to make the safe choice on all of the signings and everything that I've been doing over the last couple seasons, but you know the record's not great. 0-9, probably JL record. Lost 10 in a row because we went out of the playoffs in JL 11.
There's been enormous amounts of criticism toward James French, the owner, because this isn't a league to just that doesn't cut it in this league.
The Bison are just absolutely horrible. I mean, I can take 4 different dumps, and that will still be a better roster than the Bison right now.
You know what? I hope the Bison get better someday. They're a good representative of what this league stands for.
I'm worried about the Bison. I honestly am. I'm worried if they will ever make it back to championship level. I hope they do. I want them to. They're a franchise that deserves it. I just don't know if they know how to win right now. I believe they do want to, but the Philadelphia 76ers also want to win games. They just don't know how either. And that's kind of where we're at with the Bison right now. Hopefully, it can go in the right direction sometime soon.
As we now head into the upcoming JAL 15 season, hope is once again present. This offseason, French has made more roster moves than ever before. His father, James French II, has been added to the team, but the signing that caught everyone's eye not long ago was Eric Titus, little brother of number 3 ranked player and MVP hopeful Colton Titus of the Bambinos. Going forward, the Bison are banking on him to develop into something special. Their hope is that he can eventually lead them out of the cellar.
You know, I think just in general, it'd be great for the league if the Bison could come back to glory. They're still one of the most storied franchises and have so much more history than anyone else. As a commissioner, a player, a fan, everything of the league, I hope someday they come back.
I hope to see him get the thing turned around again. I mean, since we left the franchise, I think they've made the playoffs 1 time in the last 5 tournaments. You know, whether or not they get a roster put together that'll give them an opportunity to be competitive remains to be seen. They haven't done that to this point.